Step into a shadowed dungeon in Seville, Spain, the year 1485, where the air is thick with the stench of damp stone, rust, and the metallic tang of fear. Chains clank faintly in the gloom, and a flickering torch casts eerie shadows on a grim array of instruments, wooden racks, iron forks, and basins of water, each a silent promise of agony. A figure in black robes, a priest of the Spanish Inquisition, stands over a prisoner, their eyes cold with righteous zeal, as accusations of heresy echo off the walls. The prisoner, bound in irons, trembles, their fate sealed by whispers of betrayal. This is the heart of the Spanish Inquisition, a relentless machine of religious torture that wielded brutal methods to enforce Catholic orthodoxy. From the rack's merciless stretch to the suffocating terror of the taka, these techniques were not mere punishments, they were rituals of control, designed to break body and soul in the name of God. Today, we're plunging into the dark history of the brutal methods used by the Spanish Inquisition, weaving together tales of torment, defiance, and haunting mysteries that linger like ghosts in Spain's past. Whether you're driving through the night, working at your desk, or craving a story that claws at your soul, settle in. Let's unravel the chilling world of religious torture, where faith and fear forged a legacy of historical cruelty. The Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478 by Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, was a campaign to forge a unified Catholic Spain after centuries of religious diversity. Authorized by Pope Sixtus IV, it targeted heretics, Jews, Muslims, Protestants, and suspected witches whose beliefs challenged the Church's authority. The Directorium Inquisitorum by Nicholas Eymerich and later texts like the Malleus Maleficarum shaped its brutal methods, blending religious fervor with calculated cruelty. The Spanish Inquisition's arsenal, strapeto, taka, rack, burning at the stake, Judas cradle, heretic's fork, and more was designed to extract confessions, deter dissent, and purify the soul, often in public spectacles like the auto de fe. These acts of religious torture were rooted in a society grappling with cultural upheaval, fear of divine judgment, and the need for control after the Reconquista. This is a journey into the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, a chilling exploration of the dark psychology that drove historical cruelty and the human cost of fanaticism. Let's begin with the strappado, a cornerstone of the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, engineered to inflict excruciating pain without drawing blood. Picture a dungeon in Toledo, 1490, where a suspected converso, a Jew converted to Christianity, is hoisted by their arms, tied behind their back, and suspended from a ceiling beam. Heavy weights, often stones or iron, are tied to their feet, pulling until shoulders dislocate with a sickening pop. The Directorium Inquisitorum praises the strappado for its effectiveness, its controlled agony forcing confessions of heresy or secret Judaizing. Interrogators could lower the victim, demanding names of accomplices, then hoist them again, each drop amplifying torment. The physical toll, torn muscles, dislocated joints, and searing nerve pain was matched by the psychological dread of anticipating each fall, breaking wills before bodies. Inquisition records from Seville and Zaragoza document its widespread use, often in cramped cells where screams echoed unheard. This was religious torture at its most precise, a brutal method that left victims shattered, a grim symbol of the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. The taka, or water torture, was another devastating technique, its invisibility making it all the more terrifying. Imagine a cell in Salamanca, 1485, where an accused Muslim convert is bound to a slanted board, their head tilted downward. A cloth is placed over their mouth, and water is poured slowly, trickling into their throat, simulating drowning as they gasp for air. The Directorium Inquisitorum describes the taka as ideal for extracting confessions without spilling blood, aligning with church prohibitions on excessive violence. The torture was relentless. Water choked the lungs, panic surged, and interrogators paused to demand names, each pause heightening dread. The psychological impact was profound, with the sensation of drowning driving victims to despair, their minds breaking under the strain. Used extensively in Granada and Córdoba, as noted in trial records, the taka was a silent but brutal method, its terror a chilling hallmark of the Spanish Inquisition's religious torture, etched into its dark history. The rack, one of the most infamous brutal methods, was a machine of unrelenting agony. Picture a dungeon in Madrid, 1500, where a suspected Protestant is strapped to a wooden frame, their wrists and ankles bound by ropes tied to pulleys. The Inquisitor turns a crank, stretching the body until joints pop, muscles tear, and vertebrae strain under the pressure. Juan Antonio Llorente's Historia de la Inquisition describes the racks used to force confessions of heresy or secret worship. Its slow, deliberate pain allowing interrogators to prolong suffering over hours or even days. The physical toll, dislocated limbs, torn ligaments, crushed spines was matched by the psychological dread of hearing the cranks creak, knowing more pain was imminent. Used across Spain, From Barcelona to Valladolid, the rack's versatility and excruciating agony made it a staple of religious torture, its brutality a cornerstone of the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Burning at the stake was the ultimate fate for unrepentant heretics, a fiery spectacle of religious torture that left an indelible mark on Spain's conscience. Imagine a plaza in Seville, 1481, where a convicted heretic is tied to a wooden stake, kindling piled high around them. Henry Charles Lee's Historia de la Inquisition describes the flames rising, smoke choking the lungs before fire consumes flesh, the crowd a mix of fervent believers chanting prayers and horrified onlookers weeping silently. Burning was symbolic, believed to purify the soul and warn against heresy, as outlined in papal bulls and the Malleus Maleficarum. The process was agonizing. Smoke suffocated before flames reached the body, prolonging suffering for minutes or hours. Public executions during auto de fe ceremonies, like those in Seville's Plaza Mayor, reinforced the church's authority, yet could spark rebellion, as seen with Joan of Arc's burning in 1431, a precursor to Inquisition methods. This was religious torture at its most dramatic, a brutal method that defined the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Let's dive into a story that brings the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods to life. In 1492, in Granada, a converso named Diego de Suzan was accused of secretly practicing Judaism and tortured with the taka in a damp dungeon. Inquisition records describe his gasps as water filled his lungs, yet he refused to confess, his silence a quiet defiance. The next morning, his cell was empty, the board slick with water, and a single candle left burning, its flame untouched by the damp. Was this a miracle suggesting divine favor, or a daring rescue by his community, risking death to defy the Inquisition? Locals whispered of a shadowy figure in Granada's alleys, chanting Hebrew prayers under moonlit skies, their voice echoing Diego's resilience. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture sparked tales of resistance, its horrors woven into the dark history of medieval Spain. The Judas cradle was a lesser-known but horrific device, its invasive cruelty a testament to the Spanish Inquisition's brutality. Picture a dungeon in Zaragoza, 1510, where an accused which is lowered onto a pointed, pyramid-shaped seat, their weight pressing the tip into their body, tearing flesh with every movement. Trial records describe the Judas cradle, used for witchcraft or sexual sins, its slow, penetrating pain forcing confessions. The victim was hoisted and dropped repeatedly, the point causing infections that often led to death. The psychological horror being impaled before interrogators or clergy was devastating, with shame compounding physical agony. The device's design required minimal effort, letting gravity inflict pain, yet its effects were unrelenting, targeting the body's most sensitive areas. Documented in Aragon and Castile, the Judas cradle was a chilling tool of religious torture, its brutality a grim chapter in the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Let's explore another tale, this one from 1505 in Barcelona, where a woman named Catalina de Zamora, accused of witchcraft, was tortured with the strapado. Inquisition records note her screams as her shoulders dislocated, yet she refused to name accomplices, her silence infuriating her interrogators. The next morning, the dungeon was empty, with a single rosary bead left on the floor, gleaming in the torchlight. Was this a rescue by her village, defying the church's wrath, or a divine sign of her innocence? Locals claimed the dungeon echoed with soft prayers, a ghostly figure clutching a rosary in the shadows, her presence a haunting defiance. This mystery, rooted in the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture fueled tales of resilience, its horrors etched into the dark history of medieval Spain. The heretic's fork was another precise instrument of religious torture, designed to punish and humiliate. Imagine a cell in Valladolid, 1495, where a suspected Protestant is strapped with a double-pronged fork, one end piercing under the chin, the other against the chest, forcing them to keep their head upright or risk impalement. Inquisition records describe the fork's use, its prongs digging into flesh if the victim's head drooped from exhaustion, drawing blood with each movement. The pain was sharp but localized, yet its psychological toll, constant dread of worsening the wounds, was profound. Interrogators demanded confessions of heresy, their questions punctuated by the victim's gasps. Used in Spain and Italy, the heretic's fork combined physical torment with mental strain, its cruelty a chilling relic in the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Let's dive into another story, this one from 1520 in Toledo, where a merchant named Juan de Leon was accused of Lutheranism and tortured with the rack. Inquisition records describe his cries as his limbs stretched, joints popping under the strain, yet he refused to renounce his beliefs. The next morning, the rack was found broken, Juan gone, and a single silver coin left gleaming in the dark. Was this a bribe by his wealthy family, or a divine omen of his innocence? Locals claimed the dungeon hummed with whispers of Protestant hymns, a haunting echo of Juan's defiance. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture sparked tales of resistance, its horrors woven into the dark history of medieval Spain. The auto de fe, or act of faith, was a public spectacle that amplified the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods. Picture a grand plaza in Córdoba, 1490, where hundreds gathered to witness a procession of heretics, some destined for torture, others for the stake. The Historia de la Inquisition describes these ceremonies, with clergy in ornate robes, prisoners in San Benito sackcloth tunics marked with crosses and crowds chanting prayers or jeering. Tortures like the strapado or taca were sometimes performed publicly, their pain a warning to the faithful. The auto de fe was theatrical, blending religious ritual with judicial terror, its spectacle reinforcing the church's power. Yet it could spark unrest, as seen in Granada in 1499, where crowds rioted to save a converso, suggesting sympathy for the condemned. This public face of religious torture made the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods a communal act, its historical cruelty a stark reflection of medieval Spain's fears. Let's explore another tale, this one from 1488 in Saragossa, where a midwife named Isabel de la Cruz was accused of witchcraft and tortured with the heretic's fork. Inquisition records note her struggle to keep her head upright, blood trickling as the prongs pierced her flesh, yet she refused to confess. The next morning, her cell was empty, with a sprig of rosemary left behind, its scent lingering in the damp air. Was this a rescue by her community, risking death to save their healer, or a divine sign of her innocence? Locals claimed the dungeon smelled of rosemary, with faint whispers of her prayers echoing at night. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture fueled tales of resilience, its horrors etched into the dark history of medieval Spain. The garrote, a strangulation device, was another brutal method, used for execution or interrogation. Picture a dungeon in Valencia, 1515, where an accused heretic is seated, a rope or metal band tightened around their neck by a screw or lever. Inquisition records describe the garrote's use, its slow constriction cutting off air, causing panic and pain without bloodshed. The device was precise, allowing interrogators to pause just before death, demanding confessions. The psychological terror knowing each turn could be the last was as brutal as the physical suffocation. Used in both secret dungeons and public executions, the garrote's efficiency made it a favored tool of religious torture, its cruelty a grim note in the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Let's dive into another story, this one from 1497 in Granada, where a scholar named Alonso de Salazar was accused of spreading Jewish teachings and tortured with the garrote. Records describe his choking gasps as the rope tightened, yet he refused to confess. The next morning, his cell was empty, with a single page of Hebrew script left behind, its ink still wet. Was this a rescue by his students, or a divine sign? Locals claimed the dungeon echoed with scholarly chants, a ghostly echo of Alonso's voice. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture sparked tales of defiance, its horrors woven into the dark history of medieval Spain. The social context of the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods was rooted in Spain's quest for religious and cultural unity. After the Reconquista, Ferdinand and Isabella sought to forge a Catholic nation, viewing Jews, Muslims, and Protestants as threats to their vision. The Edict of Expulsion, 1492, forced Jews to convert or leave, and the Inquisition hunted those suspected of secret worship, known as conversos or moranos. Public tortures, like burning at the stake during auto de fe ceremonies, were spectacles to enforce orthodoxy, as seen in Seville's Plaza Mayor, where thousands gathered. Yet excessive cruelty, such as the mass executions in Granada, sparked resistance, with communities hiding conversos or spreading tales of divine intervention. This tension control versus rebellion made the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods a double-edged sword, their religious torture a grim reflection of historical cruelty in medieval Spain. The psychological impact of these brutal methods was profound, targeting both body and mind. The taca's suffocating panic, the rack's relentless stretch, or the strapado's dislocating drops broke wills through dread, with victims anticipating each moment of pain. Public tortures like burning or the Judas cradle humiliated victims before crowds, amplifying shame and fear. The Malleus Maleficarum framed pain as divine, a means to purge sin, yet victims' defiance refusing to confess or naming no accomplices inspired legends, as seen with Catalina de Zamora. This dark psychology, where fear and faith justified cruelty, made religious torture a chilling tool of the Spanish Inquisition, its impact a cornerstone of its dark history. Let's explore another tale, this one from 1512 in Seville, where a weaver named Teresa de Avila was accused of witchcraft and tortured with the Judas cradle. Records describe her screams as the point pierced her flesh, yet she denied the charges. The next morning, The cradle was empty, its point bent, and a piece of woven cloth left behind, its threads glowing in the dark. Was this a rescue by her guild, or a divine sign? Locals claimed the dungeon hummed with the sound of a loom, a ghostly echo of Teresa's craft. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture fueled tales of resilience, its horrors etched into the dark history of medieval Spain. The role of torturers in the Spanish Inquisition added another layer to its dark psychology. Often outcasts or criminals granted leniency, torturers operated in secrecy, their identities hidden by hoods or masks, as noted in Inquisition records. They were trained to see victims as sinners, their pain a path to salvation, yet some showed hesitation, pausing before fatal blows, suggesting a flicker of doubt. The Historia de la Inquisition describes torturers as both feared and despised, their role essential yet ostracized. This psychological detachment, driven by duty and fear, made torturers complicit in the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, their work a grim reflection of historical cruelty in medieval Spain. Let's dive into another story, this one from 1500 in Córdoba, where a blacksmith named Miguel de Córdoba was accused of heresy and tortured with the taca. Records note his gasps as water choked his lungs, yet he refused to confess. The next morning, his cell was empty, with a forged iron cross left behind, its edges warm to the touch. Was this a rescue by his fellow smiths, or a divine omen? Locals claimed the dungeon rang with the sound of hammers, a ghostly echo of Miguel's trade. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture sparked tales of defiance, its horrors woven into the dark history of medieval Spain. The cultural impact of the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods shaped Spain's art, literature, and folklore. Woodcuts depicted heretics on the rack or burning at the stake, their imagery a warning to the faithful. Ballads mourned victims, turning them into tragic figures, while sermons used torture to preach against sin. The Historia de la Inquisition notes that auto de fe ceremonies were theatrical, with crowds drawn to the spectacle of pain and redemption. Later works, like Francisco Goya's dark paintings or Don Quixote's subtle references to the Inquisition, drew on these images, cementing the legacy of religious torture. This cultural footprint, driven by the dark psychology of fear and faith, underscores the enduring horror of the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods in its dark history. Let's explore another brutal method, the Spanish donkey, a device of excruciating cruelty. Picture a dungeon in Granada, 1495, where an accused heretic is forced to straddle a sharp, wedge-shaped wooden beam, weights tied to their feet to press them downward. Inquisition records describe the Spanish donkey, used to punish heresy or sexual sins, its edge cutting into the groin, splitting flesh and causing unbearable pain. The victim's own weight intensified the agony, with interrogators adding weights to prolong suffering. The psychological toll being exposed and humiliated before inquisitors was devastating, with pain lingering for days, often leading to infection or death. Its use in Andalusia and Aragon made it a terrifying tool of religious torture, its brutality a grim chapter in the Spanish Inquisition's dark history. Let's dive into another tale, this one from 1510 in Valencia, where a healer named Beatriz de Luna was accused of witchcraft and tortured on the Spanish donkey. Records describe her screams as the wedge cut deeper, yet she refused to confess. The next morning, the device was empty, with a bundle of herbs left behind, their scent lingering. Was this a rescue by her village, or a divine sign? Locals claimed the dungeon smelled of herbs, with faint chants at dusk. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture fueled tales of resilience, its horrors etched into the dark history of medieval Spain. The Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods were also shaped by the role of informers, whose accusations fueled the machine of religious torture. Neighbors, driven by fear, envy, or reward, denounced others, as seen in trial records from Seville, where entire families were accused based on whispers. This culture of suspicion amplified the Inquisition's reach, with tortures like the taca or rack used to extract names, perpetuating a cycle of betrayal. Yet some informers recanted, risking their own lives, as seen in Zaragoza in 1502, where a retracted accusation saved a converso. This dynamic of fear and betrayal made the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods a communal act, its historical cruelty a reflection of a society turned against itself. Let's explore another story, this one from 1490 in Seville, where a tailor named Pedro de la Rosa was accused of heresy and tortured with the rack. Records describe his cries as his limbs stretched, yet he named no accomplices. The next morning, his cell was empty, with a single needle and thread left behind, gleaming in the dark. Was this a rescue by his guild, or a divine omen? Locals claimed the dungeon hummed with the sound of sewing, a ghostly echo of Pedro's craft. This mystery, tied to the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, shows how religious torture sparked tales of defiance, its horrors woven into the dark history of medieval Spain. The Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods were not without resistance, as communities and individuals pushed back against its cruelty. In 1499, in Granada, a riot erupted during an auto de fe, with locals storming the plaza to free a converso, as noted in Inquisition records. Such acts of defiance, often at great risk, turned victims into martyrs, their stories inspiring ballads and legends. The Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods, meant to enforce control, could spark rebellion, revealing the resilience of those targeted by religious torture. A complex thread in the dark history of medieval Spain. Let's reflect on the Spanish Inquisition's brutal methods. The strapado, taca, rack, burning at the stake, Judas cradle, heretic's fork, garrote, and Spanish donkey were tools of religious torture, driven by a quest for orthodoxy and control. Yet defiance victims resisting, communities rebelling reveals resilience amid horror. The Spanish Inquisition, a crucible of faith and fear, left a legacy of historical cruelty, its brutal methods a haunting mirror of human nature's darkest impulses. As we close, what do these brutal methods tell us? They reveal a time when faith justified pain, yet courage shone through the shadows, with stories of defiance echoing across centuries. If this journey into the Spanish Inquisition gripped you, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share your thoughts below. What's the most chilling tale of religious torture you've heard? Was this pain justice, or fanaticism unleashed? Check our next video on witch hunts, where fear fueled torment. Stay curious, stay brave, and let the dark history of the Spanish Inquisition haunt your dreams.